All right, so we're going to look at plant growth and development today. So that is some of the things that a plant does, produces, behaviors it might show in terms of how it adapts to its environment. Okay, plants have a way different method for adapting to changes in their environment than animals do. Okay, because animals are mobile, one of their main ways to adapt to an environment is to leave it. Okay, I mean, if we're looking at like, geese, for example, they're all flying back right now. Okay, you can hear them honking as they come home. But they're doing that because they're leaving an environment where, the seasons are changing to be unfavorable. They're coming back here where the seasons are changing to be favorable for them, right? They have that option. That's one of the ways they adapt to their environment. They simply change their environment. Plants can't do that. Okay? Plants are anchored to one place. So they either adapt where they are or they die. Okay? And so that's quite a bit different. So we're going to look at some of the things that they have to adapt to, how they do that, okay, what that looks like. All right, so we're going to understand first off, what factors influence the growth of plants? What are the obvious factors affecting plant growth? Sunlight would be one. Nutrients, which are coming from the soil. Yeah, okay, ground, soil, that's an important one. What else? So we got sunlight, we got soil. Competition from other organisms. Moisture. Okay, presence of predators. Okay, so not just competition. Competition would be from other plants. Predation would be from animals. Okay, make no mistake. If you're a blade of grass, a cow is scary. Okay, because that's your predator, and you can't run away. So, things to consider there. All right, we're also going to look at what hormones are responsible for growth and development in plants. Plants actually do produce hormones. They're not. I mean, they're like hormones in our body, but they're not transported in the same way, obviously, because plants don't have a circulatory system like we do. Okay, they also don't have glands. Okay, our hormones are produced in specialized areas of the body where the cells produce them, called glands, like your adrenal glands and things like that. Okay, plants, any cell within the plant can produce any hormone, okay, as needed. Point number 3. Okay, understand that plant shape is not fixed, but it is the result of the interaction of environmental factors and growth responses. Okay, case in point. I have 2 versions of this plant over here. Okay. From a distance, they look generally alike. Agreed? Okay. But if I look a little bit closer, I can see that this one has stalks that are fairly straight, where this one has stalks that are not. Okay? Now, here's the thing you need to know about those 2 plants. They are clones. They are genetically identical. I know that because I grew them both. Okay? And what you do with this plant is when it gets too tall and it tips over, you cut it off and you stick it back in the ground. And it continues to grow. Both the part you stick back in the ground and the part you cut off will continue to grow. Okay? Like, for example, if you look right here, you can see where I've cut pieces off. Okay? It just grows out of the side and continues to grow a new one. The ones that are in there are all the cut pieces from this one. Okay? So these 2 plants are genetically identical, but they don't look exactly the same. Right? Reason being, this one I tie to the stakes differently than that one. This one I tie low so that the plant grows from the top and it grows fairly straight. This one I tie higher up, which makes it push against where it's tied, which causes it to turn. Okay? You ever seen those bamboo you can buy in the store and they're like a curl? Okay? You know how they do that? They just keep tying it. They put a piece of pipe beside the bamboo, and they just, as it grows, they tie the bamboo to the pipe until it grows around the pipe. Then they just pull the pipe out and sell you this fancy piece of bamboo. Okay? You could do it at home with a regular piece of bamboo if you wanted to spend time doing that, which you probably don't. Probably better things to do. But okay, those 2 plants are genetically identical. Okay, the same is true for this plant and this one. Okay? They are both grown from cuttings of the same original plant. Now this one is all growth on one side. That one's got growth on all sides. Why would that be? This one's kind of got growth on all sides. If they're genetically identical, why don't they look the same? Close. Very, very close. It does have to do with the sun and its location. The fact of the matter is, I leave that one exactly like that all the time. I never turn it. Every time I water this one, I give it a quarter turn. So it's always getting sunlight on a different side. So it always has to keep growing leaves towards the window. Okay, and I'm constantly turning it, making it go, oh crap, you turned me again. I got to grow leaves on the other side now. Okay, and so it grows more evenly all the way around. Okay, just so. Yes, apparently. I don't know why, but apparently it is. Okay, so all these plants here are I just torment them all the time. Right? That's what they're there for, just so that I can teach this lesson and have actual plants to show you. All right, so that's the reason why, okay, what we're saying here, plant shape is not fixed. Certain things about a plant's shape are. They're genetically predetermined. The shape of the leaves, that's genetically predetermined, okay? Things like cellular structure, that would be genetically predetermined, but their final overall shape is not, okay? That would be like us saying, yeah, at the end, when I get a new job and I have to do a lot of stuff with my hands, I would just grow a third arm, okay? Because that would be helpful and convenient somehow, so I could just do that. Like, we can't do that. The final shape of an animal is genetically predetermined. We're going to have 10 fingers and 10 toes, unless you have polydactyly, and then you might have 12, okay? And it's not all that uncommon. But overall, our final shape is genetically predetermined. All right, we're not going to be able to change that. Okay, our advantage is we can go somewhere else if the environment isn't suitable. Plants have to be able to change their shape instead because they can't move. All right, so that's the issue with plants. They're rooted to one location for life, okay? So a plant has to respond to its environmental cues by adjusting its pattern of growth and development, okay? So the program for development of a plant remains somewhat plastic, and I don't mean like the material. I mean plastic, I can make it take any shape, right? So it can assume any shape, okay? Plants of the same species can vary in body form much more than animals of the same species. So in this picture here, we can see that there's a whole bunch of like black spruce trees, okay? And they all generally grow in kind of that straight up fashion, except for this one. And it's hard to see it, but why is its trunk shaped like that? Well, so are all the other ones. They're all... no, it didn't get put on the side of the hill. It's always grown there. Yeah, it got knocked over by something, okay? Probably like an avalanche or a rock slide or something like that, knocked it over when it was small, okay? And as a result, okay, it's trying to grow straight back up again. Now, there's a couple of reasons that a plant might do that, okay? The first reason could be light, okay? If it gets knocked over and it's only getting light on one side of it, it's going to want to grow back so that it's better exposed to the sunlight. The other thing, though, could be that if it continued to grow straight out this way, what might happen to it? It would fall over. Okay, so plants do have an inherent sense of not only where their light source is, but also on which way gravity is acting. Because when they're small, it's not light that tells them which way to grow, it's gravity. Because they're usually growing underneath a bunch of other things and they're shaded. Growing up is the best way to get to the light, right? So gravity kind of tells them sometimes, grow this way so that you can get to the light. But gravity can also tell them, grow this way so you don't tip over. Okay? They'll just change their center of balance by moving their growth back over. Okay? When I was in high school and in university, I worked at a golf course, and we had this one really funky tree in the golf course. I kid you not, it looked like this. Okay? It was a spruce tree, and that's what it looked like. It literally had a big bow in the middle of the trunk. Okay? Growing around the base of this tree was a rose bush. Why is that tree shaped like that? Yeah. When these two things were young, okay, the spruce tree would have maybe only been about, you know, a little sapling, only about this tall. Rose bushes grow faster than spruce trees do, but they don't grow very big. So if that rose bush was here, okay, it might have shaded the spruce tree. So the spruce tree would grow a little more into the light, so it wasn't in the shade, okay? And after years and years and years of this growth, it started to become imbalanced. So it started to grow back this way to rebalance. By then it was taller than the rose bush, okay? And eventually grew up and over and around the rose bush. Funkiest looking tree ever, okay? At some point I have to go back and get a picture of that, but I haven't had a chance to, okay? Because it's hard for people to take my word for it, but there's actually a tree that looks like that, okay? All right, so that's plants' growth responses to changes in their environment, okay? That's the only way they can adapt, is by changing their growth, okay? All right. So a house plant on a windowsill obviously grows towards the light, okay? Case in point, that plant and that plant, okay? That one's not on a windowsill, but it's fine. It still knows where the light is. The light's over there, okay? And it's going to naturally grow towards it, okay? The one that's there that I keep turning also does the same thing. It keeps growing towards the light. Plants obviously want to do that because light is their source of food, okay? So they're always going to grow towards their food source, unless the light is so intense that it's actually damaging. In that case, you might have a case of what we call negative phototropism, which means the plant actually grows away from the light a little bit and into the shade just to protect itself. It's very rare. Okay? So if you rotate the plant, it'll soon reorient its growth until its leaves once again face the window. We call that positive phototropism. Okay? Photo means light, and tropism means a growth response or a change in shape of a plant. Okay? There's three things that can cause tropisms. Light is the most obvious one. Gravity is the second one. And touch is the third. Okay? We call that thigmotropism, and we call the growth response to gravity geotropism because it's caused by the mass of the earth. Okay? So those are the three things that can cause a plant to alter its growth, okay, as kind of a signal. All right, so for a plant to do this, though, it's got to alter its growth, and growth is controlled, as we all know, by hormones. Okay, plants and animals, okay, use these chemical messengers to regulate their processes. One of those main processes being growth. So, in let's say like the human body, okay, we have certain hormones that regulate our growth. Obviously, HGH would be one of them, human growth hormone. Okay, it's like the steroid of choice. Okay, lately. So HGH allows certain things to happen within the human body. It causes, obviously, increase in muscle mass, increase in skeletal mass, okay? You know, and it can trigger the production of other hormones like testosterone, okay, estrogen, and things like that. It can trigger the release of all of those things, which is why it's kind of like the miracle steroid in that it helps you to regrow a lot of old tissue, okay? Or to obviously put on muscle mass very quickly, okay? Because it's one of the things that it actively triggers, is it triggers the release of other steroid hormones within the body. Okay? Now, as long as we're using the natural amount of these hormones, is everything okay? Yeah, if we're just using the amount that our body produces, everything's fine. Now, the problem is that when you get old like me, the amount of those hormones that you produce decreases significantly. Okay, and then as a result, you aren't able to put on muscle mass as well. Your metabolism slows down. You're more likely to gain weight in terms of like in fat and things like that because you're not growing actively anymore. Okay, I'm only growing laterally now. Okay, instead of vertically. Okay, and I'm also not growing. Okay, like giant muscles. I'm not working out either. But okay, if I took HGH, I'd get bulky. Okay, even without working out. If I worked out and took HGH, then I'd get like, yeah, I'd be going to the gun show every day, okay? But I don't. So the problem with taking hormones excessively is the side effects of that. Your body's supposed to have a certain amount of them in your body at all times. If you take more than normal, then the glands that produce them naturally get confused. Okay, especially if we're talking about like the sex hormones and things like that. So like estrogen, testosterone, and things like that. Because testosterone is one of the best hormones in terms of muscle development, strength, and things things like that. Okay. There were the obvious positive side effects: massive muscle growth, like incredible strength. And for Ben Johnson, that was fine. That was all he was looking for. But what happened to FloJo? Everyone ever seen her? Well, she did die. Yeah, she actually ended up with liver cancer, which was caused by her abuse of steroids. But she looked, don't take this the wrong way, mannish. Well, you can look them up later. But like she had just, like she was really, really muscular. She was carrying muscle mass that normally a female would not carry. Okay, and it also resulted in a lot of her female characteristics essentially disappearing because she was taking male sex hormones and they were having the male sex hormone effects on her. Okay, now we use hormone therapy for all kinds of things. Okay, like if someone is like, for example, trans or something like that, and they're looking to have a gender reassignment, things like that, their body is still not going to produce the right hormones even if they have the reassignment surgery. So they'll take the hormones that their body can't produce, and it'll actually cause changes in their body that are going to be more akin to their chosen gender. Right? So we can use those hormones in that way. The problem is that if you have the glands that are already producing them, and then you start injecting even more, those glands just shut off. All right, so if you don't use something, generally what happens to it? It goes away. Think about it. If you're taking testosterone, lots of it, and you're a guy, the glands that produce testosterone go away. Yeah, they shrink a lot. And they become useless. You don't want that, okay? Yeah, now you're getting it. Okay, good. Okay, yeah, that's what'll happen, okay? If you're a guy and you're taking tons and tons of steroids, especially if one of them is aldosterone or testosterone, your testes will shrink. Okay, yeah. It can even lead to things like impotence and stuff like that. It's bad. Okay, like sure you got all these giant muscles, but there's some other problems that go along with it. Yes, that's what I was saying, like gender reassignment, stuff like that. Like, but those are again under the supervision of a medical doctor whose expertise is in that area. They're going to make sure you get the right amount. People that are taking steroids for performance enhancing purposes are taking way too much, right? And it becomes an addiction really because they see the results and they're just like, oh man, I got to take more, I got to take more, I got to be faster, I got to be stronger. Okay, if steroids are administered properly and short term, they're not so bad. It's like anything in moderation is okay, right? I got prescribed steroids when I was in high school for a short period of time because I had a bad shoulder injury, okay? And they were wanting to regrow the muscle tissue around the injury, okay? And so I was prescribed these steroids. The doctor didn't tell me what they were. He said, just take these pills. And I came back 3 weeks later and I'd shaved a second off of my 400-meter time. I'm like, what did you give me? I'm like, so fast. Like, oh, I gave you steroids. You probably should have told me that. Luckily, I didn't have to pee in a cup over the last 2 weeks, okay? Because I would have obviously popped positive, okay, on something like that, okay? And that's obviously what happens. So hormones do lots of things within the body, okay? They're chemical messengers that cause changes in growth, in metabolism, and when they're working normally, everything's fine, okay? Obviously, plants don't go on the juice, okay? They always produce the right amount, but for humans, okay, obviously going on the juice is a bad thing because you're taking too much or you're taking it too often, and it's going to lead to side effects. The main side effect is actually damage to the liver. The chemical decomposition of steroid hormones in the body produces toxic byproducts. Okay. Now, if it's just the normal amount of steroids in the human body, it's fine. Your liver was meant to take care of that. But if you're taking massive amounts, it causes the same thing that alcoholism would cause. It causes liver cirrhosis and liver cancer. Okay? It's really, really bad for your liver. All right, let's look at some plant hormones. Okay, so there's 5 major classes of plant hormones that we'll be concerned with, okay, and how they're concerned with a particular environmental stimulus. So we got these little alfalfa sprouts here. They're all in a petri dish, and we see them growing towards the right. What's probably over there? Light. Why is that one at the back growing the way it is? Yeah, it's trying to get into the light, but this is the quickest route. It's so far at the back that it can't see the light anymore. So what is it using instead of light to tell it which way to grow? Gravity, right? So it grows up. We can see once it kind of got into this, it'll start to do this now. Okay, it'll start to grow over towards the light now that it can see it. Right? But until it could see it, it used gravity to tell it which way would be the best way to grow. Right? Seeds always contain a fair amount of energy in them for the plant to at least get going, okay, and get itself into a position where it can carry out photosynthesis. All right, first plant hormone we're going to look at are called auxins. Okay? Auxins are plant growth hormones. Okay? They are responsible for the lengthening or elongation of plant structures, okay? Especially things like the stems. Okay? So auxin is actually used to describe any chemical substance that promotes elongation of the plant. The single most important function of auxin is to stimulate the lengthening of cells in young developing shoots. Okay? So that's good. Plants need to get taller, longer, in order to get into the sun, or they need their roots to get longer so they can go deeper into the soil and access more water. Okay? All of those things can happen with the help of auxins. But we can also use auxins to do some artificial things. Okay? This picture and this picture are of the same place, taken only a few weeks apart. Okay? And they were taken in about 1969, 69, 70, somewhere in there, in Southeast Asia. What was going on in 1969, 1970 in Southeast Asia? The Vietnam War. Okay. The problem in the Vietnam War was Americans were fighting a war they had no idea how to fight, and their enemy was very familiar with their own territory and had a massive tunnel system and a jungle to hide in. Americans didn't like getting ambushed out of the jungle all the time, so they went to the CIA and they said, look, we only have so much napalm, we can only burn down so much of the forest. Okay, there's people that live here, you know, obviously we can't be killing civilians and whatever with napalm, so we need a better way to get rid of all the forest, because it's causing us a problem. You know, they can hide in it and they jump out and shoot at us, so we need you to kill all the trees. CIA, they love a challenge. Okay, so they said, okay, we'll figure something out. So your parameters are, we have to make something that'll kill trees, but not people and animals, because that's what you want. Now, unfortunately, the CIA has a lot of, you know, really good science people who love that kind of a challenge. So they developed something that was codenamed Agent Orange. Okay? Agent Orange is a synthetic auxin. Okay? It is a synthetically produced auxin. When you spray it on the leaves of plants, it causes them to grow rapidly. Out of control, in fact, so much so that they can't produce enough food by photosynthesis to sustain themselves. They grow themselves to death. Okay? It effectively causes cancer in the plant. Now, that same stuff is available to purchase at any garden center. We call it Killex. Okay? It's the stuff that you spray on dandelions. You ever seen what the dandelions look like after the town sprays them? They grow long and coily, and then they die. Okay, same stuff. Okay, we spray it on plants. It gets absorbed through the leaves, actually through the stomates in a vapor form. Okay, and it causes the plants to grow out of control until they die. Okay, so this is the before picture, and this is the after picture. Okay, this was a jungle, right? And in the jungle, they get lots of rain. Okay, if you don't have living plants there holding down the soil, they fall over and stuff. That the soil just erodes quickly in the rain, gets in the river. Okay, it was a mess. So CIA was pretty happy with their invention here. Problem was they didn't realize that it wasn't the perfect invention they thought it was. It actually causes cancer in people, in livestock. It caused all kinds of major environmental issues, obviously, because it kills a bunch of plants. But yeah, they had some pretty major issues with some of their own soldiers coming back. Okay, because this stuff, I mean, if you've ever smelled it, it smells awful. Like it's one of the worst smelling things. But they would just spray it on their own soldiers because, hey, it only killed plants, right? And these guys would get tumors and stuff like that. They'd get lung cancer from inhaling it. It was really, really awful stuff. Okay? But it was just a synthetic auxin. It was essentially a steroid, okay, for these plants that just made them grow out of control. In smaller doses, it can be used to make seedless fruit. Okay? If you dilute it a whole bunch and put it on the blossoms of fruit bearing trees, that will trick the flowers into thinking that they've been pollinated. Okay, because a flower is produced when pollen lands on the stigma, okay, the kind of thing in the middle. Okay, when pollen lands on that, it's there's sperm actually inside the pollen. Okay, then the pollen grain will react with the stigma, and the sperm actually swim down into the base of the flower, which is the ovary, and there's an egg in there. Okay, so the egg will be fertilized by the sperm, which is in the pollen. Okay, and then the flower becomes a fruit. Yeah. Okay. So the sperm and the egg meet, that makes the seed or seeds. Okay. Lots of flowers will actually have will produce more than one seed. Okay. And the fruit will surround it. Okay. That's just how flowers work. All right. So a fruit is there to surround the seed. If you spray very diluted steroid onto the flowers, they think they've been pollinated and they build fruit, except there was no pollination, thus there was no fertilization, and so there's no seeds. Okay? That's how you get seedless fruit. Yeah, it's strange, but that's how you do it. And then obviously we use it as a herbicide as well. Okay, it still works really good for that. We don't spray it nearly as heavily as they sprayed it in Vietnam because we don't have to. Okay, but you'll notice that the town always puts up signs everywhere when they're going to spray it. This area recently sprayed, keep pets off, whatever, because the stuff's not good for you. All right, so auxins make plants get longer, which makes them a very important hormone in terms of a plant being able to change its shape. Okay, and we'll talk about that when we talk about tropisms here. Okay, so auxins are important in tropisms. You might want to just add that quickly to this slide. Okay, they're important, okay, in all forms of tropism. So that's phototropism, geotropism, thigmotropism. Okay, without auxins, those tropisms don't happen. Okay. Another plant hormone are cytokinins, okay? And cytokinins cause cell division, or cytokinesis. Okay? So they're growth regulators, but they're really important in replacing old, diseased, damaged tissue in the plant. All right? They will allow it to quickly produce new cells, okay, that can replace old, diseased, or dying cells, okay, that need to be replaced. All right? This is the kind of fountain of youth for plants. In normal amounts, they can allow some plants to live to be hundreds, even thousands of years old, right? Because they're constantly just producing new healthy cells. Okay? Obviously, in animals, we don't produce any hormone that's equivalent to this, right? If we did, okay, it would probably cause what? Cancer, rapid cell division. Okay, it's just not something that animals produce. We don't have an equivalent for that. Okay, but plants can produce it, okay, in small amounts to replace old dying cells, okay, and effectively slow down their aging process. What this is here, this picture on the left, these are the normal pieces of plant tissue with the normal amount of cytokinin in them, and then there's these tagged lines that they genetically modified to produce more cytokinins, and you can see that they're producing a lot more biomass. Okay, there's a lot more leaf tissue here in the tagged line than there is in the natural line. Okay. And same thing here. Okay, this would be a more natural version of the plant. This would be the tagged version of the plant. We can see it gets just way more leaves, okay, way more leaf tissue as a result. All right, so cytokinins cause cell division. Okay, that's what their role is. If there was a multiple choice question, okay, that would be an easy one. Okay. Then we got gibberellins. Gibberellins work similar to auxins, except that they have a bit more influence on like flowers and other parts of the plant. Okay, so roots and young leaves are the major sites of gibberellin production because young leaves is actually where the flowers will eventually, the blossoms will eventually be. Okay, so they stimulate growth in both the leaves and the stem, but they have little effect on the growth of the roots. That's primarily the job of auxins. Okay, so in stems, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division. So they work kind of like both auxins and cytokinins, okay, in the stems. Now, what we're looking at here would be two different genetic versions of the same rice plant. Okay, these are the dwarf versions. Okay, and these are the tall versions. Right? It's just a genetic mutation that causes lack of gibberellins in the dwarf. Okay, and so as a result, the dwarf version of that plant is shorter. Okay, we can see here these are also rice plants here on the left. Okay, these on the left are the healthy ones, and these ones here on the right have what is referred to as foolish seedling disease. Okay? And foolish seedling disease is caused by a fungus that grows on the roots. And this fungus causes the plants to overproduce gibberellins. Now, gibberellins will cause the plant to grow longer, but they won't stimulate secondary growth, which is an increase in the girth of the stem. So they get tall, but they don't have the thick enough stem to support the growth, and they just fall over and die. Foolish seedlings, they grew too fast. Foolish seedling disease. Okay, but it's caused by a fungus that just causes the plant to overproduce this hormone, and they grow along with skinny stems and they die. Okay. Gibberellins can also cause more blossoms to grow. All right, so if we had our natural line here, okay, we can see that there's, some blossoms and we get some fruit, okay, or, some grapes, a cluster of grapes, but from the tagged group, we get way more grapes. All right, so obviously, if we could figure out a way to do that in a controlled fashion, it means we could produce more food. All right, now, some people don't like that because they would say, well, that's a genetically modified organism and I'm not going to eat the food from it. Okay, and that's fine. Some people don't want to eat genetically modified food. Okay, that's their choice. I don't have any problem with it. It's not like they sprayed it with chemicals. They selectively bred it. Okay, they didn't inject this with more gibberellins. They just genetically bred this plant to naturally produce more and then produce more fruit. Okay, I think a lot of people get confused between what genetically modified actually means. Okay, almost everything we eat has been at some point genetically modified. Genetically modified doesn't mean a chemical process. Dogs. Okay, it's a process of selective breeding over a long term. Okay? Yeah, if I want to, if I like the way this dog looks and I like the way that dog looks, but I think if I, got them to mate, I might get cuter puppies, that's genetic modification. Okay? I'm selectively breeding these two dogs that have the traits I like together to see if I'll get a hybrid that has all of those traits. Okay? Because, maybe this dog, doesn't ever bark, and this dog barks all the time, but looks really nice. Well, maybe I breed them together, whatever. Okay, we choose certain traits and we try to produce offspring that have those traits. That's what genetic modification is. It doesn't mean it's a chemical process or somebody in a lab, some mad scientist in a lab is, creating some super organism. That's not what we're trying to do. It's selective breeding over the course of time. Okay. Oh yeah, I mean, with selective breeding with dog breeds, I mean, we've produced some ridiculous breeds of dog. Yeah, yeah, and some of them, like you say, they get the pug nose, right, and it's so bad that they can't breathe properly. And sometimes they'll get like a sleep apnea to the point where they'll just suffocate in their sleep and like weird things like that. Like look at a Dachshund. Like nature would never have selected the wiener dog shape. You ever watch one of them try to run? It's comical. Okay, they got these short, tiny little legs and this incredibly long body. It's like trying to watch a centipede run away. Okay, without all of its legs. Okay, it's just ridiculous. Nature would never have selected those things, but somebody thought it looked cute, and so they just kept selecting for this dog with the longer and longer body and the shorter and shorter legs until they bred this dog whose belly drags on the ground. Okay, like what's that? Yeah, they're the Chihuahua, right? I just keep, oh, this dog is small, that dog is small. If I keep breeding them, I'll get smaller and smaller dogs so I can take them in my purse with me. Okay, yeah. But, we do the same thing with livestock, okay? I mean, if the purpose of raising a cow is to get meat from it, I don't want to raise skinny cows, okay? I want to raise cows that produce lots of muscle mass without having to use, hormones or things like that. Well, then I'm going to breed the cows that have genes for good muscle structure. Okay? Or I'm going to breed the two cows, the cows that have good milk production. I'm just naturally going to choose those traits. If I have, a Jersey cow that's not producing any milk, I'm not breeding that cow. There's something wrong with that cow. I don't want those genes in the next generation. That's how we genetically modify organisms. Okay, we're not mad scientists in the lab modifying chromosomes and producing what we want. Okay, that's not really how it works. Okay, abscisic acid, important hormone where we live, because abscisic acid is produced seasonally by perennial plants. Okay, a perennial plant is one that grows back year after year, right? So like a spruce tree or a poplar tree, or things like that. So they grow back every year, and in the fall, as the days begin to get shorter, they are triggered to produce abscisic acid. Okay? Length of day is actually a really important cue for all plants to go dormant. Okay? They don't use temperature. Okay? Temperature is unreliable. We could get a cold snap in late August, and we wouldn't necessarily want to go dormant then. Okay? We'd want to wait a couple more weeks or whatever. So it's length of day that usually cues this. Right? And what abscisic acid does is it disrupts chlorophyll production. You'll want to write that down. Okay? Abscisic acid production. Okay? Disrupts the chemical production of chlorophyll to the point where the plant can't produce it anymore. And so as a result, the leaves change color. All right? There's no more chlorophyll being produced. So what we see are the underlying orange and yellow and red pigments that are actually always there, but are overpowered by the green pigment of chlorophyll. Since chlorophyll is the main photosynthetic pigment, its absence means the plant is no longer carrying out photosynthesis. If it's not carrying out photosynthesis, it's also not needing to transport water anymore, which effectively removes water from the xylem tubes in the plant, which is good, because if those tubes are full of water and it freezes, what'll happen to the tree? It'll die. It'll crack open. Okay? And you see that sometimes. If we get an early, hard, cold snap, you'll see some trees that'll split. Okay? They've got enough water in the xylem, and it gets cold enough for long enough that the trees will literally crack. Okay? Especially if they're older and not very flexible. Okay? They'll crack open because when water freezes, it expands and it'll break them open. Okay? So it disrupts chlorophyll production, and then that leads to a more dormant state. Okay? So this hormone slows down growth of a plant and assumes a more dormant state. All right, so what we're seeing here in this picture is someone who has been kind of studying what the dosages are. All these plants were planted at the same time. These ones were given lots of abscisic acid, less and less as we go along. Right, so we notice that these plants in the back are healthy and flowering and looking good, and the plants in the front are dead. Yeah, well, they're not dead, they're dormant, okay, because they were given the hormone that causes them to go dormant. Okay, so it stunted their growth, didn't allow them to produce chlorophyll, okay, and that's what we get. All right, ethylene. Ethylene is a gas that is produced in certain parts of the plant. We call it a hormone because it causes certain changes in the metabolism of the plant. Okay, but it's important in the ripening of fruit. So if the fruit is still hanging on the plant, okay, the little sepals, which are the leaves that are right against the plant, kind of at the base of the flower, okay, those produce a lot of ethylene, okay, and ethylene causes the plants to, or the fruit to ripen. Right? If you ever notice this, like if you have, if we're getting a big frost, people will go out and they'll take in all the tomatoes. Okay, they'll bring them in the house. If you put the tomatoes all together, do they ripen faster? Yes, they do. Okay. In fact, one way to get tomatoes to ripen quickly, I used to do this because I would want to make like a big batch of salsa, so I'd need a whole bunch of ripe tomatoes at the same time. I'd put them all in a box and throw a couple of apples in. Okay. Apples produce ethylene gas as well, and it caused the tomatoes to all ripen quickly, so they'd all be ripe at the same time. Bananas, they produce tons of ethylene gas. You can't put bananas next to anything, or they get rotten right away. Okay, not only the bananas, but whatever you put them next to, because bananas produce so much ethylene gas. That's where we get the banana principle from. You guys never heard of the banana principle? Okay, the banana principle is Murphy's Law applied to bananas. If you buy them when they're green, you'll eat them before they're yellow. If you buy them when they're yellow, they'll be brown before you eat them. It's true. Totally true. Okay, but it's also because they ripen really fast. Like bananas don't last for more than a week, and that's if you bought them green. Okay, after a week, they're already squishy. Okay, they produce a lot of ethylene gas and ripen very fast. Okay, the length of time where they're yellow is very short. The length of time where they're green is actually quite long. They ship them, they pull them off the trees, very, very green. Okay, and they ship them, they stay green for a long time. Okay, and you can see that it's also true for like yellowing, okay, of like cabbage and lettuce and stuff like that. Okay. A few years ago, a company came up with this special kind of bag called green bags. It was like one of those like on TV advertisements. You could only buy them through like if you called the 1-800 number or whatever. Okay. But they had designed this bag that had some sort of coating on the inside of it that actually absorbed ethylene. And it could make the food inside of it last a lot longer because the food wouldn't rot. It wouldn't over ripen because the bag itself was absorbing the ethylene gas. I haven't seen that ad for a long time, so maybe it was toxic. I don't know, but it worked. Okay, it kept things. It had a good scientific basis for it. All right, so ethylene causes the ripening of fruit, and it also signals a plant to go dormant or to die if it's an annual plant. Okay, so if we're talking about a tomato, that's an annual. It grows for one season and then it dies. Once it's produced fruit, it doesn't need to do anything else. Okay? The whole point was it was successful, it reproduced, it made seeds, and now it's done. Okay, and so ethylene gas for an annual plant usually signals it to just die. Okay? And they do shortly after producing fruit, they die. Okay, for other plants that produce fruit, they'll often go dormant shortly thereafter if they're a perennial plant. Okay, now tropisms. Okay, so tropisms are any growth patterns that cause a change in shape of the stem. Okay, of the plant. Right. So this here, which one would this be? Photo, geo, or thigmo? Yeah, this one's geotropism. Okay, the plant would have still got light if it grew straight out. Right? It didn't need to do this in order to get light. So it did this because of gravity. Right? So this is an example of geotropism. Most of the time, a plant will grow towards the light, but if it knows it's going to tip over, it'll try and balance itself with geotropism instead. All right, so tropisms are growth responses, okay, and they cause plant organs to grow towards or away from certain stimuli. Now, here's the most important part of this slide, okay? The mechanism for this, for any tropism, doesn't matter which one it is differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides. Okay, so in order to bend, like this plant has, the cells on this side grow fast. The cells on this side grow slow. So what ends up happening is you get cells on one side that are growing longer and they push and they bend the stem of the plant in that direction. What hormone would be most important for making cells on one side get longer than on the other? Auxins. Okay, so differential rate of growth on opposite sides. Auxins are primarily responsible for making that happen. So if I gave you a question on a unit exam that showed a plant with a big bend in it, okay, I would probably ask you to identify which tropism it was, photo, geo, or thigmo, and then explain to me how that happens, right? So you could say, well, you know, the light source is over here. It wants to grow towards the light, puts auxins on this side. That side grows faster, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Be looking for you to explain how that works. Okay, so geotropism, okay, is caused by gravity. So it's a growth response. They grow away from the pull of gravity. Right? They're obviously not growing towards the ground. Okay? They grow away from the growth of gravity. And they've done some neat experiments on the International Space Station where plants grow in zero gravity, okay? And they just grow completely towards the light, okay? Because there's no geotropism signal for them. So they just kind of grow kind of fractally generally in the direction of the light. Okay? Problem with growing plants on the International Space Station is it has to be done hydroponically. Right? That means just with water. You don't take dirt into a zero gravity environment, because it just floats around everywhere and you inhale it and you get really sick. Okay? So they don't take dirt. Okay? There's no flowers on the International Space Station. Okay? All right, so caused by gravity, okay, causes plants to grow kind of weird on hillsides. So there's that kind of shape there. Anytime one of them gets knocked over, they'll grow back up again. Okay, phototropism is caused by the location of light sources. Okay, so on this side of the plant, where the plant's getting lots and lots of light, the cells actually don't grow as much. On this side, they're trying to bend the plant towards the light so that they'd be able to get the leaves more exposed to the light. Okay, so we get short cells on one side, we get long cells on the other. Okay, this side is receiving more auxins. Okay, that's why the cells are longer than this side is. Okay, and that just causes a pushing force that causes the plant to bend. Okay, and then lastly is thigmotropism, and that is growth response to touch. All right, so that could be like the bamboo that we talked about. Okay, my plant over there that I tied them, and forced it to turn. Okay, those are all examples of thigmotropism. Okay, actually, so is this plant. This plant used to be in my house, but I won't put it back in there, and I keep it away from the wall because it uses thigmotropism. Right? I don't know if you can see it, but there's these little brown dots. Okay, all along the stem. It's on all of the stems here, but okay, you can see those little brown dots everywhere. Okay, those are actually used for it to grab onto surfaces to support itself. Okay, you see this with ivy. Ivy crawls up the sides of buildings. Honeysuckle kind of does the same thing. That stuff does it too. And I found that out the hard way. When those little brown dots come into contact with certain materials like drywall, brick, okay, things like that, they secrete an acid that actually dissolves that material, and then they grow into the pit, and that they can grip and they can hold on to it. Okay, and I didn't realize this. I had it growing on top of my cupboards. Okay, I would just go up and water it occasionally. I didn't really notice that it had actually grown into the wall. Okay, and then when I moved, I grabbed the plant and I stepped down off the cupboard, and I nearly fell because it was stuck to the wall, and it had actually rotted out part of the drywall because it had grown right through it, and it looked like veins on the other side because they just pulled it, and this chunk of drywall this big just came out of the wall. Okay, because it actually grown into it and it anchored itself to it. Okay, so there's lots of plants that can do that, and it's just a matter of thigmotropism. It's stimulated by touch. When it comes into contact with a material it can dissolve, it will, and then it'll use it to support itself. The advantage there is it can grow tall without having to have a lot of secondary growth or big stem or wood-like stem or anything like that. It can get up above its competition by holding on to something else. Okay, peas will do this, right? If you're growing peas in your garden, you have to put a fence beside them so they can crawl up the fence. Okay, things like that. They use these little tendrils. Okay, they wrap around the fence like pythons. Okay, they're just gonna grip it. Okay. So thigmotropism stimulated by touch. Okay, just make sure we know that thigmo is touch, geo is gravity, photo is light. Okay. All right, let's just talk about these questions here. You can just write something down quickly as we go through them. Okay, so why are two identical plants grown from clippings of the same plant? That one and that one. Okay, why do they look different? Because plants adapt their growth to their environment. Okay, they can't move. Their final shape is not genetically determined, right? Their final shape is an interaction of the environment and their genetics. Okay, number 2 here. Any growth pattern in plants is a tropism. Okay, so photo, geo, or thigmo. Plants in the tropical rainforest, are they going to use abscisic acid? Okay, abscisic acid makes a plant do what? Go dormant. If you're in the tropical rainforest, do you want to go dormant? No, you want to grow all the time. If you go dormant, okay, everything will overgrow you, right? So no, they don't, because they don't need to. There's no seasons there. The length of day doesn't change. The temperature doesn't change significantly. Okay, so they don't need it. Okay, number 4 we talked about here. Okay, 2,4-D. Okay, is Agent Orange. It's Killex. It's the stuff we spray on weeds to kill them. It's a synthetic auxin. Okay, but it produces cancerous tumors in humans because it is, after all, a hormone. Okay, our body just doesn't know what to do with it because it's not a human hormone, and so as a result, it does trigger some metabolic changes that are not good. Okay, if you're exposed to it in large amounts for long periods. All right, and what's the hormone that's involved in the ripening of fruit? ethylene, right? All righty.